Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone is having a good time here at Authenticate. My name is Christina Holker. I'm a co-executive director of the FIDO Alliance, and I'm your MC for the rest of the afternoon. So let's jump right in. I'd like to introduce Jeremy Grant, who is here to facilitate an OMB Fireside chat. So, Jeremy, over to you.
Great. Well, thanks, Christina, for the introduction. And I'm assuming we'll see in a moment both Chris and Eric Mill up on the screen. Hi, everybody. Welcome to what should be an excellent fireside chat discussing the federal government zero trust strategy that the Biden administration issued earlier this year. It's a little bit less cozy a setting for a fireside chat that I might like, since I'm here and both Chris and Eric are back in the White House complex in Washington, D.C. But I'm still thrilled we were able to make this happen, and really grateful for both of them for taking the time to speak with us today. So in terms of introductions, I'm Jeremy Grant. I'm a managing director in Venable cybersecurity and privacy practice in D.C. I'm joined today by Chris DeRusha, who's the U.S. government CISO, and Eric Mill, who's a senior advisor to the federal CIO. To set the stage, on January 26th this year, the White House Office of Management and Budget issued Memorandum 2209, which is not really a fancy name, but it's a very important document. It basically is a really major policy directive that sets the stage for moving the government toward adopting zero trust cybersecurity principles. And the first pillar of the strategy is identity. And as I think many people in this room are very well aware, the authentication layer of identity gets extra special attention. So we'll be diving into that today. But first, Chris and Eric, can I ask each of you to just briefly introduce yourselves and explain a little bit about the role each of you plays in government?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jeremy. So I'll kick it off. Jeremy mentioned I'm the Federal Chief Information Security Officer. I also have another title as Deputy National Cyber Director in the newly created Office of National Cyber Director here in the White House. The goal there is that there's one person kind of in the two offices that's doing the same job. But what we're doing is setting federal policy, setting the performance metrics for that, measuring the progress, ensuring alignment to resources and things like that. So that's in a nutshell what we're focused on here.
Thanks. And Eric?
Yeah, I'm senior advisor to the Federal Chief Information Officer. So I work closely with Chris on a lot of different cybersecurity initiatives. I'm a lead author of the Zero Trust strategy. I work on a lot of different issues related to identity, authentication, tech modernization broadly throughout the government.
All right, thanks. I was saying fireside chat, I feel like I should have brought a lighter and at least held it up so we'd have a little bit of a flame to have the conversation, but these lights are pretty bright coming in at me, so that'll have to do.
We brought our flags, Jeremy, so at least we're trying something.
I appreciate that. You guys are really in sync. They're both on the right side. You have the same, I can see the same trim with an OMB behind you, so looks, you do have the seal, Chris, which I'm impressed by. But anyways, let's dive into things. Talking about the zero trust strategy, give me a little bit of background. Why was it that the Biden-Harris administration decided to create this strategy? What was really driving this?
Yeah, maybe I'll start with that one and kick it to Eric if I miss anything important. But I was on the transition, so we were staring down SolarWinds as we were walking into the administration in January of 2021. So that was the big thing, right? It was an immediate need to set out some clear direction for agencies. And then we started developing what became Executive Order 14028, which we call the Cyber Executive Order. But then events kept happening, right? Like Exchange, Colonial, just go through the list. And it just felt really serious. And so one of the things that we thought is now's the time. Zero Trust principles have been around for a few years. But now's the time to say, this model we've got is not working. We need to get really serious fast about transitioning to a completely new model, assume breach mentality, et cetera. And so we tasked ourselves in 14028 with developing a federal cyber strategy for zero trust and how to implement that. But so a couple things from there, right? We looked around, a lot of really fantastic foundational documents. You got NIST 800-207 was in place. The NCCOE at NIST doing great work. DoD had a fantastic reference architecture, but it was 170 pages long. And what seemed to be missing for us was this clear roadmap and action plan for agencies. Where do they start on this journey and how do we get them moving? And so that was really kind of the goal. The goal wasn't to find some perfect zero trust implementation articulation, right? It was how do we ensure that we're pushing agencies on one common, consistent implementation path How do we ensure their readiness for that journey? How do we do things like just define practical starting points in each of these pillars? I think, and most importantly, and where I'll end is, how do we create a system where we can share lessons learned and benchmark our progress along the way, speaking from a common lexicon, using the same maturity model? And so those are all really important elements which ended up in the strategy of I think, now we'll be able to do that.
Yeah, I'll just add that I think despite all the work people have done to define it, and Chris mentioned, there's a lot of reference material out there, more every year. NIST, DoD, and DHS and others in the government have done a lot on this. Despite all that, certainly at the time we were issuing this strategy, zero trust is still something of a bit of a slippery topic that is, you see the word applied to many different things. And I think it was important for us to try to give some kind of something to grab onto in terms of some real specific actions and some scaffolding for us all to hang on to over a couple of years.
Yeah, I think it's a good point in that it's a term that has become, how would I say this, as somebody who's a big advocate of zero trust, it's become a little bit overused, a little hyped, and you're seeing a lot of different people take it and twist it to kind of put, their own twist on it in many cases, to the benefit of, a particular company's product or a line of products as opposed to what folks are thinking about. And so the idea of, White House policy for federal agencies actually setting it out to say, this is what we're actually talking about and these are what the pillars are, is pretty notable. I will say, my observation's been regardless of whose definition, identity management, authentication are always important within zero trust. Why is it, from your perspective, some of the old ways of doing IAM and authentication just don't work anymore, given the way the adversaries have started to evolve their attacks?
Yeah, I'll kick that one off. So there are many things that are happening in the world of enterprise identity broadly, right? And zero trust is, I hesitate to say it's any one thing, right? But at its core, certainly one of the things is just being able to make smarter decisions about access based on who is doing what and why and when, and being able to just have the information coming together to be able to do that. And so that has to happen at the identity layer. One of the things we've put quite a bit of focus on in how we approach this was around phishing and defending from phishing and related sort of social engineering attacks that take advantage of what have become increasingly known weaknesses in how authentication works. I recognize this, I'm probably preaching to an audience that is the choir here, right? But it is really important to understand how critical this stuff is. I think we all understand that passwords have a lot of obvious weaknesses, hard to remember, easy to convince people to enter into anything. They all get stored and breached at once. But the thing that is really less understood, though it's getting more now with every new interesting breach, is how conventional multi-factor authentication is also really fallible, right? It's because adversaries at this point can pretty easily, cheaply, fully automate the pretending, right? They can automate the process of pretending to be a website to you. They can automate pretending to be a browser to the real thing you're trying to log into. It can automate every piece of it. And there doesn't have to be somebody on the other side of the line, like feeding you text messages and copy and pasting your code into something. That's all just automated. So if someone can convince you to enter your password on a fake website, there's really no reason that you wouldn't also just enter in a second piece of text or numbers or whatever it is. We also, and this is also becoming more widely understood, things like push notifications that have become very common, have been growing in use in enterprise security, are just as fallible, and if not more so. And we're seeing lots of cases, both against government and industry, where people's phones will just get spammed with approve, deny buttons until somebody hits approve. So we obviously have to do better. And from our perspective, what we have said as a policy matter is we just can't keep using these conventional methods when we know how easily they fall when it counts. So we're really focused on opening doors and knocking down barriers to taking the phishing resistant approaches that we have and making them work, and especially knocking down barriers to pulling in newer approaches, FIDO-based ones being the big family of them, and really making better use of those inside the federal government.
And in this strategy, we gave explicit permission to do so, right? In a way that people were telling us, it's a policy hindrance. So we said, well, great, we'll make sure it's not anymore. But look, it's a huge transition, as I think most of you are aware, when you look at the federal government footprint. I mean, we still are pushing for MFA of any kind everywhere, while we're also pushing for, phytotechnology and phishing resistant strong authentication. And it's like, it's going to kind of have to be a balance based on risk, as we look at the type of assets we're protecting and like where we put our efforts first and investments and metricing and all of that. It's going to be a big transition, obviously.
Yeah, and I'll say on the authentication side, I mean, it's really been quite a year. In his opening statement or opening keynote to kick off this conference a couple hours ago, Andrew Shikiar, who's the co-executive director of FIDO Alliance, along with Christina Holka, who kicked us off just a few minutes ago, noted that at the policy forum that we had back in DC, or I'm supposed to be in DC, it ended up being on Zoom, that you spoke at, Eric, one of their predictions were MFA compromises are going to only increase this year. And now that we're sitting in October, it's a little depressing just how correct he was. But it's, I think something we're seeing quite a bit of now where it's, the attacks are getting automated. I remember, I think it was back in March, I was reading an article, I want to say it was in Motherboard. Joseph Cox had written about how this was now something that was getting so simple to do that you had bots that were doing it. And while I'm reading the article, my phone called, my phone rang. And it was somebody claiming to be from Amazon, a robot, saying, oh, we've detected you bought a $999 iPhone, and then click here if you didn't make this purchase. And then it then took me to somebody who was trying to get me to launch the 2FA in my Amazon account to let them in, which I like to have fun with these guys. So I actually got about 12 minutes in before he realized he wasn't getting anywhere. But these attacks are getting a lot more widespread, more scalable, which is a real issue. I want to ask, outside of authentication, but in the identity bucket, the strategy puts a really big focus on ensuring that identities are managed at the enterprise level and looks to shut down some of maybe the legacy application-specific identity systems that we see in government in favor of ones that can look across an enterprise and an agency holistically. Tell me a little bit more about the logic there and what you all want to see.
I don't know, Eric, do you want to take that one first, or you want me to?
Why don't you take the first crack?
Well, I mean, so Jeremy, to clarify, your question is about, how are we taking on the massive legacy challenge that we've got across federal government with these agencies that are many hundreds of years old?
Yeah, especially on the enterprise, on the identity side, where outside of the focus on authentication and phishing-resistant authentication, there's another segment in the identity pillar of the Zero Trust strategy that talks about managing identities at the enterprise level as opposed to the application level.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a tricky one, right? Because I mean, when you read M2209, you see us moving it intentionally towards the application level. And we got some feedback after publication that, hey, maybe you've kind of de-emphasized enterprise level too much. And so we take that point, right? This is a big transition. What we're dealing with the federal government, you're not going to have it all overnight. And so again, I think it's extremely important to us to kind of be focused on both for now. But the point that we're trying to make to everybody is it's not sufficient at the enterprise level. And if you're not doing it at the application level, you're not putting that emphasis there, and you're not moving to phishing resistant MFA at the application layer, eventually, now, it's just a matter of time that you're going to get hit. And I think that was the main emphasis and point in M2209 that we were trying to make. But I do think it's fair that there is a little bit of confusion over kind of what were we saying explicitly. But I don't know, Eric, what you'd have.
Yeah, no, I think this is, there's a few areas in the Zero Trust strategy where we basically said there's going to need to be some flexibility here. It's going to need to depend on the situation to not the beyond court model is not going to be the correct model for every organization, right? And it's going to depend on there's SASE based models and also some more conventional based models, and you're probably going to see the full spectrum of them across the government. But we also we know that the sort of totally conventional approach has not been working anywhere, government included. And so what we've tried to do is design something where we really put it on agencies to describe how they are changing, what methods they're going to be using in different parts of the organization, help us understand how they're applying the principle of least privilege to their large, complicated organizations. We're not going to argue with an agency about how complicated and difficult it is, but we're going to ask that they actually articulate that complexity and how they're tackling it in a real way. We also did there is one thing we included in the zero trust strategy, which was to say, take something in your organization that scares you, that's internal facing, and figure out a way to put that on the internet, and know that you can protect it there. And that was like raised some heads, but it's because it's for a few reasons, among them that we know that that's the actual threat model for federal agency systems that scare you. That's the model you should be applying, at least in your head, if not in your technology, to your organization. And we really do anticipate the federal government having to grapple at the application layer more effectively than it has, and to invest in that space. So you see a spectrum, and we're engaging at that spectrum with folks, but trying to see some changes made.
Got it. So we're about 9 months in now since the strategy was issued. How would you say implementation's going so far across the agencies?
Yeah. Well, look, it's not necessarily consistent everywhere. I'd say I'm going to start at a high level and we'll work from there. First point is we've built momentum, right? Like this strategy and the efforts we've had behind it, in particular, the requirement for an implementation plan for each agency has really helped ensure that there's actual momentum that's sustained, and it's being built into budgeting processes. It's being built into basically everything, right? We've made it the priority for an agency when they're putting forward, their cyber budgeting requests. So I think that's been crucial. And I think in other cases, we've also seen CIOs stand up and personally own these implementation plans, which is really exciting when you do. And a lot of them will say, look, it's not because you told me to, right? When they say it's because I believe this is the right answer, and then here's how we're going to implement it. And we left that flexibility in there in part, where some of the actions had timelines on them, and others we said fold them into this implementation plan over the next 3 years. We want to meet you where your procurement cycle is at, or whatever your current projects are at. And so we've been finding that, across the board, there is definitely a lot of momentum, a lot of forward movement. Some agencies are hiring. You hear that music?
I'm still hearing you. You getting music?
Yeah, we just got flooded.
Nice
with
elevator music there.
Oh.
Sorry, I thought that was everybody.
No.
I thought it was supposed to be really boring. It was just like, let's cut this guy off, pull him off stage.
Kind of like at the Emmys when somebody's giving the speech too long.
That's
right?
exactly what just happened.
Cue the orchestra.
Glad it wasn't intentional. It was really sad. So, but look, some agencies are hiring zero trust program managers, or they're putting new people in these positions, not just reassigning someone and saying, yeah, they'll be our PM, but actually hiring to it, which is I look for, that's a serious movement. And then maybe staff aug around that, if they don't have the people with the technical skills that they need, putting those out into the market and getting in a real kind of PMO implementation team. None of that would have happened if we didn't have this strategy and we didn't have this momentum in place. But listen, also on the flip side, agencies can't move too far in certain directions without new funding. And that's a big part of where we're at now, is ensuring that we align those funds to all policy.
Yeah, so let me ask a follow-up on that, actually, because I get asked a lot about funding as a guy who used to be in government and now is, on the outside, in that, the government has a history where sometimes, policies come out, but it's not always easy to align the budgets with those policies. I know the TMF, the Government's Technology Modernization Fund, is one of the things you've been looking at to support agencies. Can you share more about how the TMF's being used, as well as potentially other channels that might exist on the funding front?
I'll start on that one, kick to Eric. We put out new guidance in TMF after we got the American Rescue Plan funds in March of 2021. So for those not tracking, we got $1 billion, which really juiced this technology modernization fund idea in a way that, had been getting maybe 25, 50 million, a year max. And we made some key decisions around repayment. Before, it had been at most a 5-year loan. Here we said, hey, for certain projects, we're going to say you don't need to pay it back, or pay it back at very minimal value. That really opened up a whole lot of interest. We got billions of dollars worth of project proposals. and many of those were, or some of them were zero trust out of the gate. So we picked a handful of agencies, and the compact we asked back from them said, hey, you're going to get your money right now, where others are trying to get their money into 23 or future budget requests. We're going to hand this to you right away. And the compact back is, we need it to be an enterprise good. Like what you learn from this, we want to pull back in and work with CISA and others from the center point to learn those lessons. And it's been really cool because a lot of those agencies we picked up front, they've been in communities of practice we set up, engagements that we have with our industry or academia partners. They've really lived the mantra of what we asked for, of like being along for the journey and the ride of figuring these really hard things out. That's the TMF journey. I don't know if Eric want to add anything to that. I can talk about the budget as well, but I want to see if Eric has anything to add to TMF.
No, I think that's right, and I think we're also, in addition to the TMF awardees, we're really trying to do what we can, to that point about an enterprise good, aggressively pull agencies together around common areas and make sure that we're understanding what they're doing, but like really hearing their barriers, knocking them down. We're doing this in focused areas. FIDO is actually one of the ones we're focusing on first. And we're finding that, agencies in general do work together and talk. There is a sense of community in the federal community, which is something that is great to see. But we're really helping focus that energy, in particular in areas that push some agencies out of their comfort zone a little bit, and where our engagement, where us pulling in folks from CISA and GSA, as well as identifying the parts of the federal government that are actually quite motivated to push on these things, and making sure that all the energy they're putting into it is transferable and copyable and useful to other agencies. So we're trying to be one of the channels for not letting all that energy and work go to waste.
But can I just quickly follow up too? Having this strategy and construct and structure has really helped us in the annual budget process too. Because what we've been able to do is disaggregate and do strategy-based budgeting all the way down to a technology investment. And we can do that by, in each budget build, saying these are the capabilities, everybody, inside this pillar of zero trust. And like, if you're looking for an investment on X, Y, or Z tooling, it fits here. And you can bring that back to us. We get that data, and then we can build back up and have a sense for each pillar, how much people are investing over each individual budget year, and then how much at an aggregate level they're investing in their zero trust strategy implementation. That you can't do if you don't have all this structure built from the top down. And it's frankly, like, it's not something I've been able to do before this job here. It's really exciting. And there's big value in it. We're in the middle of the FY24 budget build for those counting in the federal government space. And it's really helping us have meaningful conversations with the budget side.
That's good to hear. And I'll say for those in the room who don't follow the federal budget process, which God bless you if you count yourself among them, but the government's fiscal year just ended September 30th, so we're now in fiscal year 23. Congress still has to pass the budget for the full year, but we're now gearing up for a process probably in February where the president will release the proposed budget for fiscal year 24. And so I think what I'm hearing is, you have a policy from a year ago, agencies are now thinking about requests for 24, and you're working with them in terms of resourcing. Is that sort of a fair characterization?
Yeah, that's right. But doing it in a way where, look, the budget officers for all these agencies are focused on everything for the agency. This is a complicated issue space. We're trying to simplify and distill it and say, look, if you don't know, just find out if they're doing zero trust. We'll do all the data back end to make it easy for you and see if we can get the right number. And so we've just found a construct where we can communicate with our business partners, if you will, in I think a sensible way to bubble wrap our strategic priority into actual line investments in tooling.
But if I could say, this is my second time in government. And the first time when I was at GSA, I went through at least 2 distinct government-wide cybersecurity pushes. And none of the things that Chris just described were visibly present, certainly at the agency level, where there was that concerted of an attempt to really tie this to funding and work through the details and create that scaffolding that everybody could build from. Doesn't mean it's easy, but the work is there.
All right. Well, I know I got the blinky light saying we're at time. Real quick, sort of next 30 seconds, bonus question. What's the one thing that you're most excited about with the implementation of the Zero Trust strategy that we should be seeing from government over the next 12 months?
Oh, I don't know. Honestly, I think it's really what we talked about just now. Like, I mean, we saw a 10% increase in federal civilian agency funding from the president's budget request in 23. I think in large part because we started to build the structure there. And I'm just trying to see if we can keep building off of that success by being compelling and showing with data the need for these investments, because that's what's been missing from it. So that's, to me, it's unfortunately the most exciting thing is really that boring. But if you can't fund these things, you're not doing much. And so it's really, really important that you use that data to drive those investments.
Thanks.
I won't give you the thing I'm the most excited about because I don't know what that is, but I will give, in the spirit of saying something new, I will say that I'm quite excited that CISA's Protective DNS program just fully formally opened its doors to the government, in part because it's among the leading services on the internet that supports and is creating encrypted DNS connections on what is fundamentally still a mostly plain text protocol on the internet today. And that's something that the US government is at the forefront of changing, and we're very proud of that.
I appreciate it. Well, look, I know we're at time, and I got to get the next panel on stage, but Chris, Eric, really appreciate you taking the time. I'll see you back in DC. Thanks for beaming in from the East Coast. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.